kid from the bush who grew into a legend in his own lunchtime, former SAS soldier Michael J. Malone has seen it all. This is Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, hosted by the man himself, Mick Malone, along with Toby Malone, as they examine this long, storied career in the Australian Special Forces. Join us each week for behind-the-scenes insight, exclusive readings, and brutally honest truths from a true original. Welcome to Never Die Wondering. Welcome to episode 18 of Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, a podcast that explores the life and legend of Michael John Malone, OAM. My name is Toby Malone, Mick's son and co-host of this podcast series, joined by the man whose name is in the title, Mick Malone. Hey, Dad.
There you go, mate.
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah. Just had a fabulous roast.
Oh, good. Excellent. Sunday night roast. Nothing better. I guess that's memories of childhood, isn't it? Like going back to
Big
memories
time.
of when your grandmother was the amazing cook.
Nobody cooked like her.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about her in Hail Mary the Creek's Up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I met her very often. She died when I was quite young, but she's maintains the legend in the family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, it's good. I'm glad you're well fed. So you're ready to talk about this next phase in which you were not particularly well fed, or at least not as decadently fed, because you're on your way to war.
Yeah. Well, uh, heading off to war as a young bloke, it's a huge adventure.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any idea what it's going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
You rely on the older blokes who've been there before to show you the ropes. And we had a couple of older blokes in our patrol. And the bloke who mentored us on the selection course, he's in another troop, so I never got to go out the bush with him.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. And so you've done some training in Australia and you've done some training in New Guinea, but really
yeah.
nothing can prepare you for actually getting in there where the bullets are flying and you're up in the hot.
When the whips are cracking.
Yeah. So this chapter we're going to get into talking about your deployment and how you got out there into Vietnam for the first time and the last few weeks, and this includes the story of losing your cousin Peter.
Yeah.
And when you found out about that. So we'll hear about that moment. Maybe we'll discuss it after we've done the reading. So yeah, lots of sort of big moments in this chapter where you're finally getting to the pointy end. So why don't we get into it? So today we'll be reading chapter 15 of Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, OAM, published in 2024 by Imprimatur Books, Perth. This chapter, entitled Deployment, covers pages 119 to 125 in the print edition. The ebook may have slightly different numbering, so follow from the beginning of the chapter. As we read, the body of the text will be read by author Mick Malone. Whenever we come across a footnote, we'll pause in the least disruptive way possible, and I will read the footnotes. And now, without further ado, Two Ranks on the Road.
Chapter 15, Deployment, 1969. Welcome to the DAT. East Perth Station was where we came in, and there was an army bus waiting, unloaded our clobber onto the bus, and away we went to Campbell Barracks for the final phase in our deployment. Everyone was full of beans and brimming with expectation. 2 Squadron had a very eventful tour during Tet, tragically losing Harry Harris during the tour, which Gary Lobb was awarded the Military Medal, MM, in this action. We were to deploy on the 19th of February, relieving 2 Squadron, and as we finished most of our work up, there wasn't so much to do now. We still had kit inspections to make sure we had all our basic gear. It was serviceable and was serviceable. Reg was right onto this stuff. I spent a week in a Dixie bash as a Dixie basher in the OR's mess at the time, and it was the only time I ever was ever charged in the army in 28 years. I was supposed to be in the kitchen when the duty officer, Tony Haley, came through around 6 a.m. Who's the Dixie basher? He asked the cook. Malone, he said. He promptly marched out to do the paperwork for a charge of absence from place of parade, which could attract a penalty of 14 days confined to barracks, CB. Meanwhile, I was still blissfully in the land of Nod, and once the realisation hit me that I was in the shit, I raced down there and concocted a story about being out in the pig room when Haley made his inspection. Once the cook confirmed that Haley had not been out in the pig room, my plan was set. I fronted Reg and said, "But sir, I was there on time working in the pig room." Reg asked Haley if he inspected the pig room, and he said, um, "No, sir." Gee. Reg then turned to me and said, "Get out." And that was it. When I saw Haley later, he had the glimmer of a smile on his face just to say, "Fair cop." I remember this stuff. It was around this time that I heard dreadful news about my cousin Peter Anthony Malone, who had been in Vietnam for a full 12-month tour with the 3rd Cavalry Regiment in M113 armoured personnel carriers. I was in the Diggers Boozer in Swanbourne, and the phone rang on one Sunday night. I answered it. Kelly's Woodyard, a normal smart-ass way to answer the phone in the barracks, in the Boozer. I heard a voice on the line. "Can I speak to Mick Malone, please?" He said, "Speaking," I said. "It's Dad. Peter's been killed," and he hung up the phone. Stunned is probably a pretty tame word to describe my feelings. I had a couple more beers and went off to bed in the lines. I woke up with a serious jolt in the morning and realised the gravity of the news from Dad last night. This was the only time I ever heard my father's voice on the phone. It was nearly impossible for me to grasp what had happened. Pete was a big strapping cove who had done well at school, rising to cadet under officer CUO at Liverpool High School. His parents brought a war service home down the line in Canley Vale, which was kept to an immaculate standard by the bustling housewife Shirley. His father, my Uncle Terry, who served in World War II in an armoured unit in Western Australia, waiting for the Japanese to land, which they never did. Terry had a few years in civilian jobs, missed the Korean War, but when we got involved in the Vietnam War, he signed up again. By 1960, he was a Warrant Officer Class 2 and had his sights set on joining Ted Sarong's Australian Army Training Team, AATTV. After a lot of training, he finally deployed to Vietnam as an advisor on 23rd of July 1968. To make matters worse, Pete had extended his tour for a further 3 months so he and I could get on the grog together. I was due to arrive in mid-February '69 with 3 SAS Squadron, as one of us had this damn had this damn fool idea that he extended his tour. Pete was killed in action only 3 weeks before I got there. On the 18th of January 1969. He was killed when the APC he was commanding ran over a tank mine in Bien Hoa province on Operation Goodwood. Um, they were carrying a full infantry section into battle, and tragically, he was the only one killed. R.I.P. Pete. Terry was also in Vietnam at that time with the AATTV and flew home for the funeral. Auntie Shirley didn't handle Pete's death at all well and was horrified when Terry announced he was going back to Vietnam to finish his tour. She had been relying on him to get through this grief. His second son, Graham, came home on his way down to the ski fields to make sure she was okay and said to her, "Make sure you don't do anything silly while I'm gone." She then took her own life. I was stunned. She was one of my favourite aunts. It put a real dampener on our family, I can tell you. A couple of days later, I received the terrible news. After I received the terrible news, my SSM, Des Kennedy, MM, called me in and said I was to parade myself up to the CO's office that afternoon. And he would go with me. When we got there, I was surprised to see the CO, RSM, and my OC, Major Riz Beasley, there to greet Des, and I thought, I'm up for the high jump here. I racked my brain looking for a possible crime I may have committed to warrant such an assembly of heavies for a poor little baggy ass. It must have been something that happened in New Guinea or down at one of the local pubs. Trooper Malone, you're not in trouble, so relax. You're no doubt aware of the death of your cousin. And as a follow-up, I've had a call from the Prime Minister's office. It appears your grandmother, Mrs. Catherine Malone, contacted the PM's office and demanded you be prevented from going to Vietnam with 3 Squadron. Her view was that she had lost one grandson and her son Terry was serving with the AATTV uh, and in country, and I was about to deploy with 3 Squadron. She said one death out of 3 family members is enough, and she couldn't countenance another casualty. The family had done its bit, she said, and the CO gave me the choice to go or stay. I was stunned that my family had done this, but I understood it. I said, "Sir, I'm going, and that's if that's all right by you." I couldn't let down my mates who I'd trained alongside for 2 years. "March out, soldier," he said. I marched back down to the squadron to get stuck into whatever we were doing at that time. And I must admit, though, due to Pete's death, I found it difficult to concentrate on whatever we were doing. I sought out John Juvie Matten, who was in 3 Squadron's first tour when he heroically saved Russell Copeman's life after he was gut shot in the bush. In a contact In a contact, Russ, as tail end Charlie, was wounded, and Juvie ran back to where he was, picked him up with his pack and rifle, and ran 1,500 metres through the jungle to a landing zone, tended to Russell's wounds, slung out an aerial, and got comms back to base. They were soon pulled out and flown directly to one field hospital in Vung Tau, where they stabilised Russell and operated on his wounds. He was evacuated back to Australia but relapsed and died 3 months later. R.I.P. Russell. Juvie should have been awarded at least a DCM for his actions, but somehow the OC never put him in. There was a story told to us young blokes by one of the 1 Squadron, first tour lags, that the OC wouldn't put Juvie in for a gong because it would show up the patrol commander, who had chucked in the towel in the bush and was unable to command.
Footnote. He was later removed from the squadron and sent to an infantry battalion.
I can't confirm the veracity of this piece of intelligence. Suffice to say, we should leave it well alone, but Juvie still deserves recognition.
Footnote. When I was the SO3 Tea and Biscuits at Headquarters Special Forces in Canberra in 1990, my boss, Chris Roberts, asked me to slip down to honours and awards and see if there was a paper trail. After a day of searching with the archivist, not a single lead was found. Long story short, Major John Murphy, MCOC of 3 SAS Squadron at the time, had not submitted Juvie for anything. If there was no paper trail back to the time of the incident, then that's it. Nothing further could be done. This probably needs to be reinvestigated now.
Juvie was severely cut up about the loss of his mate Russell, uh, but came to terms as a soldier. If he wanted to serve on, he would have to get in and get it out of his mind, which he did. His advice to me on Pete's death was, "Suck it up, princess. Soldiering is an inherently dangerous occupation and people die. By all means, grieve, but then move on. His advice was to get as good at soldiering we can and make the other guy die for his cause. This advice kept me alive for our entire tour. By early February, we were champing at the bit with a few last range practices and 5K gallops. Towards the middle of January, the three squadron advance party was preparing to deploy. But Johnny Twang Burling, one of the L Troop patrol commanders, was ill and pulled out of the tour. We mounted a panic raid to get his 2IC Corporal Freddie Roberts packed up and out to the airport ASAP to join the advance party. Phew, close call. The advance party was important in that it did the formal handover from 2 Squadron and prepared the troop lines. The OC had many briefings to attend at Task Force headquarters, along with briefing his troop commanders who had also been part of the advance party. Back home, we spent a lot of time in the Swanee Hotel and OBH, where we played every day as if it would be our last. We had plenty to do to get ready for the big flight to South Vietnam. Letters were written home, trunks were packed, and white travelling shirts were picked up from the Q store.
Footnote, we were flying by Qantas via Singapore. The Singaporeans weren't too keen on us wearing uniforms, especially shirts emblazoned with SAS stuff in the airport. I think it was a diplomatic thing as Singapore remained neutral in their attitude to the American war.
I was really excited to be going at last after 2 solid years of training in cold, hard bush in Australia and in the mountains of New Guinea. I must admit I wanted my father to be proud of me, although he was no supporter of the Vietnam War. We lined up on 3 Squadron car park for the final words from the CO, RSM and Ross Bishop, our 2IC and contingent commander. And then we were away on buses to the airport. Most of us had never flown on a Boeing 707, as so it was a real buzz. The hosties looked after us really well, with food and drink during the tour, during the 4 hours to Singapore, where we were confined to the terminal. 2 hours later, we reboarded for the flight to Saigon, where we find ourselves in a long line of every plane imaginable, all trying to land at Ton Son Nhut Air Base. Talk about busy, apparently one of the busiest airports in the world. When we disembarked, we met 2 Squadron on the tarmac with big grins on their faces and the old nut, "You'll be sorry," and so forth. Trucks took us to another part of the very busy airport where USAF Hercules was waiting to ferry us to Nui Dat in Phuoc Tuy province, quite close to Saigon. The last time I was in a Herc, we were on our paracourse and we sat sitting on the floor with a seatbelt over our waist. When we alighted, it was as dusty as the deserts in Australia, and you could have sworn we landed in Meekatharra. It was smack in the middle of the dry season, and dry as a Methodist picnic. Fair dinkum. L Troop took over the lines previously occupied by G Troop, 2 Squadron, and what a mess they were. Rotten sandbags, tents falling down, duck boards which had been seen better days, and even ammo tins shoved under the floorboards, some with ammo in them and the others empty except for a couple of smoke grenades. We unloaded the trucks and we were directed to our lines by Woofer Neil, our troop sergeant. When we found where we found typical barrack room steel beds, 3 per tent. My fellow tent occupiers were Pancho Kirkes and a little smart-ass Dixie G. I didn't know much about this bloke. He was one of the 3 Squadron first tour blokes, but we never hit it off at all. Anyway, he wasn't with us long before he was moved off to D&E platoon in the task force. Our trucks came down and we stowed came down and were stowed in the tent. Our trunks came down and we were stowed in the tent. We had our full battle gear with us in the tent, including rifle and magazines. Des Kennedy declared all ammo should be returned to the ammo bunker at the Q store after a patrol and would only be drawn when a patrol had a warning order, wingo. I think each of us had one magazine of live in the tent just in case we were in a war zone, after all, weren't we? We noticed sandbags strewn around the lines, and it was explained to us that each sandbag, under each sandbag was a piece of unexploded ordnance from the ammo dump explosion down the hill the day before. And the ordnance dudes had yet to come up and clear the lines. Two men had been killed in the explosion, which destroyed most of the task force ammunition supply.
Footnote. A year later, my future brother-in-law, Lieutenant Ross Blue, would lead Clearance Driving Team 3 to clean up the ammunition supply after several unsuccessful attempts by others. Ross noted this extraordinary achievement in his 1976 book, United and Undaunted. Quote, in March 1970, shortly after Lieutenant Blue's team had taken over, a major ordnance clearance task was mounted by a joint service EOD company at Dong Ha below the DMZ. The year before, enemy rockets had detonated an ammunition dump and initial clearance efforts had led to EOD casualties. An area of 80 acres had been sealed off, the whole scene littered with damaged ordnance of all varieties. The particular danger lay in the thousands of golf ball-sized bomblets, which required only ounces of pressure to fire them. Between March and June, all members of CDT3 rotated singly through the large team employed on this task, which resulted in the salvage of 1,700 rounds of usable ordnance, 1,500 rounds of 8-inch shells, which were dumped at sea, and the destruction of a variety of other lethal material. The task required the transfer of some 1,100 tons of explosives by hand. End quote, page 24. Many thanks to Russ Baker for unearthing this information.
We're out. Welcome to the DAT, boys. We avoided the sandbags and were given a tour of the squadron lines. The diggers' mess hut was across the road from the kitchen, and the officers' senior and CO dining room next door. Further up the hill, next to the SIG shack and squadron headquarters, the officers' sergeant's mess occupied one of the large steel prefab buildings. The diggers' boozer was up at the end of J troop lines, while the SIG lines were further up the hill again, near the OC's tent. This is where the path diverged, and one path led to the observation post, North OP, looking over the rubbish tip and armed with 30 cal M2 machine gun, which couldn't be depressed low enough to engage Sir Charles.
Footnote. We had all sorts of nicknames for the enemy, usually laced with the laconic Aussie sense of humour. We'd call the Viet Cong things like the VC, the Kong, as well as the term Charlie, favoured by the Yanks. In typical Australian style, Charlie became Sir Charles and Chaz.
If he was scrounging in the tip. I must admit it was an exciting time to at last be on the sharp end. We had the job ahead of us in the bush, and most of us were looking forward to it. What was ahead was a mystery, but we were determined that Charlie would be coming off second best. End of chapter.
Right. Gotcha. Sorry, I'm just making sure I got the right. I'll take all this out, don't worry. And that was chapter 15 from Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, as read by the author. Okay, so a major shift heading from Australia into the war zone. And you were 22, 21?
21.
21. Yeah, you turned 22 in Vietnam.
Turned 22 that April.
Right. So yeah, just think about how I was when I was 21. I don't know. I don't know if I had the starch to.
You would have been on.
No, no, no. I don't think so.
None of us thought we had the starch, mate, but you had mates around you,
Yeah,
and without them, you couldn't have done the job.
yeah. And I guess the training is the thing that gets you up to the point
And
where you can
training,
figure it.
intense. Used
So
to say the training's always intense. Of course, let four be too tense.
so so in that chapter, as I mentioned earlier, we we hear the story about how you found out about Peter's death, and it's one of those things. It's hard to sort of overemphasize how important that was because Peter wasn't just a distant cousin. He was a very close member of your family.
Yeah, first cousin.
Yeah, and so you're essentially the same age. You're good mates when you're growing up. He asked you to come and join infantry with. Sorry, he asked you to come and join armor with him.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no way in the world I was going to do that.
no, no, no. But it was sort of one of those unthinkable things because you had so many. Because I had it. I don't think there'd been any other family members lost in wartime because the family served in World War Two.
And
Um,
World War One.
and
No, we
well,
didn't lose anyone,
yeah, and so this obviously shook everyone to the core.
especially Grandma Catherine.
Yeah.
Imagine ringing up the Prime Minister's office.
Well, imagine getting through as
Grandma,
well.
stop them going. They were
And
quite happy to do that too.
right. So what if they had a done if you had have stayed home, would you have left the unit? Would you have would
No, I couldn't have looked my mates in the face, mate.
yeah.
How would you? I'd had to be out of there pretty quickly, I'd suggest.
Well, a lot of blokes would take that opportunity.
Yeah, but no one ever did.
No,
We had a
no.
few nachos later on who didn't want to be there. And I used to say, if you don't want to be here, just tell them and leave. Oh, I can't, well, I couldn't do that. My mates would never speak to me. I said, well, that's it. Your mates become the arbiters of life.
Yeah. Yeah, and so losing Peter like that, that's and then that the terrible story about your Auntie Shirley and how it
Um,
killed her as well. It's a yeah, yeah, it's one of those the legends in the family that I grew up hearing about it all a big part of the fabric of the Malone family of that moment. And as I said in an earlier episode, I'm named for Peter. My middle name's Peter.
yeah.
Um, and so he was always this figure as I grew up, even though he died a decade before I was born. But so that can't have been good for your focus when you were going in, and John Matten was the one that really saved you.
Oh, John Matten was a champion, mate. He still is today.
Yeah,
Um, I think they're going to revisit his gong. Um, I heard on the grapevine the other day. What level it is, I don't know. It could be an MID, it could be a DCM, or it might even be a VC. Who knows?
yeah. So
In
how would
my
they?
view,
So how would they do that without a paper trail? So would they be using
well,
anecdotal evidence?
the young bloke on the naval ship recently who went down with the ship and continued to fire the Oerlikon gun at the Japanese planes and shot one down actually. He was given a VC. It was like 75 years after the war.
Right.
So it's not a. Americans proved that you can get medals of honor 50, 80 years later. It's a stupid rule to have. If there's no paper trail, you can't put it in.
Right.
Just create one.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're
So,
all rooting for Juvie.
well, and you'd like to think that books like yours, which document those moments, have got to contribute to that paper
You'd
trail.
like to think so, wouldn't you?
You know, if it's written about in enough in enough books, and it has been written about in a few
Yeah.
different places. Um, no one's making things up, and there's a reason why Russell didn't die in the bush. So,
Yeah.
so how did he get
Absolutely.
out? So clearly he got out somehow. So
I've been on Juvy's back for many years to write his own book. And he said, I can't write a book. What are you talking about? And I said, I gave him a thesaurus and a dictionary once. And he still brings that up. And I said, the only three words you know, Juvie, is and, if, or but. And he keeps saying to me, oh, we've still got that thesaurus. I really used to call it the thesaurus.
oh well, maybe we can get a campaign going to get everyone to encourage him to write that book because it'd probably be a
Yeah.
good read.
Oh, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, just sit him down and t tell him to tell his story, and we'll write it all down. Just
Mm,
record it. So yeah,
yeah.
it's so a really formative time here, and so as you were getting ready to deploy, was Pete on your mind as you went away?
Well, he sort of was, but I put it out of my mind a fair bit because I said to my boss, Wolf O'Neill, I said, this is going to knock me about. He said, no, no, you'll be right, mate. She'll be
Yeah,
right.
and
Typical laconic Australian.
and you weren't able to
And
get back to New South Wales for the funeral.
no,
Yeah,
no, I wasn't. I wasn't going anyway. I hate funerals. But at the end of the day, I deployed and thought no more about him. I went down to Three Cav and met a few of the blokes who were with him. Um, but that was it. I moved on.
yeah, but that choice to stay in Vietnam to have a beer, really, yeah, it's tragic. The tragic tragedy of that extension. You probably would have come home.
Yeah, there was a bit of that in it, but I had my own life to lead and my own war to fight. Uh, and once again, it was all mates.
Yeah.
Mates were all,
Hmm.
are even more important than family at that stage.
Yeah. And then can you talk a little bit about that culture shock of showing up in this dry desert heat in Vietnam?
Oh, the dust at Nui Dat at Luscombe Field was just amazing. It was just red dust like Meekatharra.
Hmm,
I couldn't believe it. The dry season was so dry. The place just dries out like a chip. Wet season is wet as wet and green. Dry season, brown and dusty.
hmm,
It's hard to believe that a country can go through a cycle like that.
right.
But we met the dry season and then we were there for the wet season and then the dry season again. What fun.
And then Two Squadron met you on the tarmac, having seen some stuff. How did
Yeah.
that compare to the following year when you guys were on your way out and one squadron was coming in? Was it?
We treated one squadron pretty fairly, I think.
Yeah.
There was, there wasn't too much get it up, yeah, sort of stuff.
But it sounds like Two Squadron didn't treat the lines very well.
True squadron. Yeah, geez. No, they were good. They're good soldiers. They had a far better war record than we did. Frank Cashmore blew up the trailer full of 18 Viet Cong
Right.
uh, in an ambush,
Yeah. Well.
and that's all somewhere in there.
Yeah. I think that's later in a upcoming chapter. So lots of stuff. But I guess we're going to get into the real meat of it all in the next chapter. So that is all the time we have this week for Never Die Wondering. Join us next week for the next installment in our exploration of Mick Malone's career as we get to the 16th chapter of the book itself, entitled Dat Life. If you have a copy of Two Ranks, read along with us. I've been Toby Malone, and thank you to Mick Malone for bravely joining me on this journey. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, mate.
This has been Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words. For links to purchase your own copies of Mick's books, visit the show notes or mickmalone.com.au. This podcast is produced by Toby Malone, Joe Malone, and Mick Malone, and engineered by Toby Malone. Theme music is The Happy Wanderer, the official SAS march, as reimagined by Cormac Malone and Meg Logue Malone. Yes, this is a family affair. This is a GM production in association with Imprimatur Books.